Welcome back for another edition of Political Breakfast. We are here at WABE and so glad to be back in our old format. We've been live these past few weeks because of all the fluid politics that have been happening, but we are here and we are glad that you're listening as well. With me this morning is Republican strategist Brian Robinson and the Atlanta Civic Circle's Saba, who's been filling in for Theron Johnson. Hello to both of you.
Hello, ladies.
Good to be with you.
Yeah, and actually good to see you two both. Before we hit the record button, we were talking about the Olympics, and I watched here and there, but there was a whole lot of drama, it seemed like, with these Olympics.
There was, and I was saying I'm glad they're over because I've had a very busy July and August, and it was a massive time suck because I couldn't tear away from them when I was at home at night, or if I worked from home during the day, I would watch the live coverage. I'll say, amidst all of the divisiveness and turmoil in American politics and in American cultural life, it was like mouthwash for me. It was a cleansing to see Americans of so many different stripes proudly wearing the flag, proudly wearing their USA gear, and crying when they hear the Star-Spangled Banner or singing along. It was just heartening for me to see patriotism on display, often by people that are already iconic Americans, whether it's Scotty Scheffler or LeBron James. Simone Biles is another great example. I mean, these are huge American names, and to see them take part in this celebration of our country and to represent our country and to be proud that they weren't just winning for themselves, but for all of us, for the red, white, and blue. I know I sound corny, but
that's what the Olympics is supposed to be about.
To me. It was heartening to me.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be about. Jordan Childs, though, I'm pulling for her. I hope she gets to keep that bronze medal. I really do.
Yeah, that was really unfortunate, and I'm sure they're just incensed about it. But to Brian, to your point, one thing that I thought was just really special was Brittney Griner. And the women's team won, and Brittney Griner, the troubles and tribulations that she went through, dealing with being in a Russian encampment, the United States having her back, and we saw that on display at the Olympics, and that was just really special. And then also there's always this, competition, particularly between the U.S. and China. And we tied. Only the reason why we tied is because one athlete refused to share the gold medal.
Yeah.
Oh, but we also were way ahead in the overall medal count. So we were tied in the golds. So I agree. I was very happy with what Brittney Griner said. Mm-hmm. I want to do something for my country because my country stood up for me.
Isn't that so? Oh, yeah. That gives me chills. Gives me chills. Yeah. So did Tom Cruise. Not on the same level, of course, but the closing ceremony was a wow moment as well. That
was wild. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. You saw him in the crowd all week, and they kept saying he's going to do something spectacular. He's going to do something spectacular, and he did. So it was quite a week, and we just want to say congratulations to all of our medalists. You make us proud. Someone here in Georgia is making news. State lawmaker accused of driving under the influence, Devin Solly, been in the news the past week or so, charged with DUI and charged with some other things that, have raised a few eyebrows. He's denying it all, of course, but just wanted to know what you all thought about this. Is it just another instance of a state lawmaker getting pulled over or not?
There are some circumstances that are involved in this that I'd like to clarify for voters. I was with Representative Saba the day after all of this happened. I talked through it with him. I want to disclose that I do work with the Georgia House Republican Caucus, and so I was talking with him in that capacity. So I'm not pretending that I'm objective in this. I somewhat represent him in this scenario. But Devin put out a statement on Saturday saying I was not intoxicated. I turned right from Boulevard onto Memorial and the right-hand lanes where you're supposed to go after a right turn. And that became a bike lane, but the bike lane is under construction. It was unmarked. You couldn't get out once you were in it. It's kind of blocked off. But there's no marking there saying that it's a bike lane. So it kind of came up on him kind of quick, didn't know what was going on, knew he needed to get out, slowed down, and was looking for a way out of the lane, and a biker came up. Biker jumped off of the bike. So the headline said he struck a bicyclist. That's not the case. The bicyclist jumped off, left the bike in the road. The car did bump the bike. So that's what happened there. But one thing that I think is important.
I was gonna say, are investigators saying that's what happened, or is that's solely his account?
I don't think the fact that the cyclist wasn't hit is even under dispute. I mean, he was fine. Nobody was hurt in this. He wasn't touched by the car. But one thing that happened was it said, potentially drug charges. And what happens when you get pulled over and don't take a test is that the charge sheet auto-populates. And so it was all of these possible charges that went in there. And so the news stories, they're accurately reflecting what the police statement says, what the charge document says, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the reality of what happened. He was not on drugs. He's never used drugs in his life, he said. This is somebody who's made his life as in the first responder field, saving people's lives. Someone who's a devoted Christian family man. This is not somebody who's out using drugs and then driving around Atlanta. So,
yes, Saba, I know that was one of your first questions. What kind of drugs are we talking about here when we saw that charging document?
Yeah. It's always curious when you hear a Republican is getting arrested on drug charges. It's like, wait, what's going on there? No, in all seriousness, I mean, when I first saw the story, I saw it on social media. And the first thing I thought about was like how scary that must have been, particularly for the cyclist. Cycling in Atlanta is not an easy feat. And I say this as someone who
do it at your own risk, really.
Yeah, I was previously on the board of the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition. We did a lot of work to try to make Atlanta safer for cyclists, just as it should be in any major city. Now, I don't understand, maybe because it was late at night, there was some confusion about, that the bike lane was protected. And that's another just kind of interesting thing. This was supposed to be a protected bike lane, which means the cyclist would never be in danger or rarely in danger of being hit by a car. And so I think this, really highlights the need to invest in quality infrastructure for cyclists in the city. Make sure that the signage is accurate and correct and clear for both the cyclists and the drivers. And, I hope that what the representative says is true. I would take him for his word.
So, Brian, what I'm hearing from you is this is a good guy, stand-up guy, and you believe him.
A series of unfortunate events occurred here. Mm-hmm. Some was absolutely right. The cyclist did nothing wrong. The cyclist was in a lane that he thought of as a bike lane. And there is a barrier there along the side. So he was acting rationally. Devin Solly was driving, turn right, in the right lane, as he's supposed to do under Georgia law. And that became a bike lane without any markings suggesting that it was. So he, too, was not acting recklessly. He was acting rationally by being where he was. It's also dark. He's not familiar with this road. It's not one he travels a lot. So it's easy to see how you can be confused by what's happening. But I think what's important here is he had his wits about him. He recognized he was in the wrong place too late and was looking for a way out when the biker came upon him, jumped off the bike, and the car and bike collided. So I think both were doing things that are rational to explain. No one was acting dumb. Nobody was being reckless. I think what the police report is going to show is that Representative Saba acknowledged having some alcohol, a small amount of alcohol at dinner, along with a lot of water, along with dinner, and was not impaired when he drove. Yeah, I can understand somebody he's 59 years old being dubious of doing a field sobriety test for, can you stand on one leg any given time of day? I'm sure that's part of what was going through his mind at that juncture. But when he tells me he was not intoxicated, I believe him. I know that's not the standard that police can use. And one thing I appreciated about what Devin Solly did here over the weekend was he always said the police were very professional. They did their jobs. The charging document is auto-populated. That is how it goes. No one did something to intentionally hurt him or damage his reputation with false charges. So it's a very pro-law enforcement stand, but this is how the judicial system works. I think the Georgia DOT, which is building this bike lane, will be probably saying sometime this week, it's not officially a bike lane yet. There are no markings there. This is under construction. We're trying to move toward what Saba's talking about. I did not know she was involved in biker safety and in this coalition. That's perfect timing to have Saba along on the show. But we're working toward having a safer lane for bikers. But we're in this construction process, and obviously it has created some confusion.
Well, let's move quickly from the State House to the governor's mansion. Governor Kemp is talking. He's talking about Trump, and he's talking about the Harris-Waltz agenda and ticket, and says he doesn't like it, and he still stands behind Trump, or the GOP ticket, so to speak.
Regardless of, all the different things that have happened, we cannot afford 4 more years of the Biden-Harris agenda and now the Harris-Waltz agenda, which I think would be even more radical than the Biden-Harris agenda is.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was with Governor Kemp briefly last week, and in between him trying to steal my French fries, which he did steal some of my French fries, he reiterated to me,
Governor
Brian,
Kemp eats French fries.
Kemp.
Okay.
Well, he was jealous of my
News
French
alert.
fries. He stole some of my French fries, and then he went and got his own French fries, and then attempted to hand some back to me with his fingers. To my
No thanks.
He said, "I just want to win," and we have seen tweets from Senator Lindsey Graham this week or last week saying that he heard Governor Kemp at a fundraiser say, "I'm going to put my field operation to use this year to benefit the Trump campaign here in Georgia." The Kemp field operation is the most well-funded and well-oiled that we have in the state and probably have ever had in the state. And we're going to really need that field operation, not just for the top of the ticket, but because of the down ticket races. We have several districts, and this is something the AJC reported on Monday coming out of the Georgia House Republican Caucus retreat. Some had expressed concern that in metro Atlanta districts where Kemp is popular, above 50%, Trump is below 50% in some of these, and Kemp's not at the top of the ticket, Trump is. And so that's going to be a balance that the state legislators on both sides of the Capitol, the senators and House members must navigate. Kemp's very well aware of that. Kemp does want a Republican to win Georgia for various reasons. It keeps Democrat money out in future races if they think that this isn't an easy win here. So long term, it's good for Republicans to win. But Kemp's still got 2 more years, and he wants to make sure that he maintains very strong Republican majorities in both the House and Senate. I think that's his main goal. So by helping Trump, he's helping himself, and I think self-interest is often the most important motivator, obviously, in politics. So when he tells you he's going to work at it, believe him, because he has a self-interested reason to turn out Republican voters, to turn out Trump voters.
One thing he did say, Saba, was that the Harris-Waltz agenda would be more radical than the Biden-Harris agenda. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm reminded of when Kemp first ran for governor, how conservative, how far to the right he ran. And so that tracks, right? I think ultimately Governor Kemp endorsing Trump, or at least putting his political operation behind Trump, tracks with kind of who Kemp is at his core. I think he recognizes that the demographics in the state are changing, and this could very well be the last presidential election where it's a real battleground and it's a toss-up. And if you see like the the trends for what's happening at the state house, the state senate, metro Atlanta, right, Cobb County, Gwinnett County, there's talk about changes in Forsyth County, Cherokee, et cetera. I think Republicans in Georgia are trying to figure out what does the future look like. And it's imperative for him politically to put that political operations behind Trump.
Yeah, let me build off of what Saba is saying here. So Kemp's political operation is going to be doing the field. Speaker Burns has an operation, and then the House caucus has an operation, all of which have their own budgets, their own fundraising, their own execution plans. And one thing they're all doing together, particularly in these majority maker districts, there's one around Metro Atlanta, where you're going to have some swingy, tightly contested races because the partisan balance is pretty close. And again, these are often districts where Kemp is much more popular than President Trump is. There's going to be a huge focus on these districts and targeting minority voters in a way that you've never seen Republicans in Georgia do to this level. Because to win these Gwinnett seats, for example, Gwinnett's hugely important, numerous highly competitive districts there, you're going to have to be able to reach Black voters, Vietnamese, Korean, and Chinese voters, Latino voters. I mean, it is a real multicultural county, and those voters are now at levels of where they can be deciders in how these elections go. So you're going to see a huge push from the Republicans on those minority voting groups to woo them, to knock on the doors, to try to get them to be part of the team. And that's going to be key in this election. Republicans have two districts that are going to be really, really tough. One, of course, is Representative Misha Maynor from the west side of Atlanta. She's a former Democrat, switched parties. And that district's one where Joe Biden got 90% of the votes. That's tough. That's going to be a tough ride, even though she's worked really hard in the district and has her own special narrative there and is known by her constituents. And then you have Ken Vance from the Milledgeville-Macon area. His district got redrawn in the last redistricting cycle and was made a majority black district. That's, look, he can make a real go at it. He's got to really convert a lot of black voters in that district, which he may be able to do. As we've discussed many times, black men are more open than ever to voting for Republicans. But we know we have our work cut out for us in those two districts. And so if you lose two, you got to go make that up somewhere else if you're going to maintain parity. So that's kind of the lay of the land here.
Saba, is that still the trend you feel that some black men are voting Republican, more and more black men here in Georgia, rather, voting for Trump, and the Democrat momentum that we talked about 2 weeks ago? Do you still feel that building?
Yeah, I do think it's still building. Since President Biden got out the race, Democrats have raised almost $500 million. So in just 3 weeks, $500 million, which is just wild to imagine. And this shows, just how important Georgia is. Trump has put nearly $24 million in an ad buy in Georgia. And by comparison, he's only done $3 million in Michigan. And granted, it's still early, but I think that's a big sign. A lot of the black folks, black men in particular that I talked to, were really upset with how Trump handled the NABJ conversation. And the general racial attacks on Kamala Harris.
A lot of people, it seems, started waking up, to that.
So that is not a way to get the black man vote, is to attack a black woman. Mm-hmm. So if that's what Trump is going to do, then he most certainly is not going to get black men on his side. Now, if he talks about the economy, which as we've been saying, right? Trump can run a real campaign on the kitchen table issues, but he doesn't have message discipline. And instead, he makes an attack on others, just unnecessarily divisive. And so if that's what he does, then he loses Georgia.
When does he realize that discipline will probably play in his favor?
Well, he's 78 years old. I don't think anything's going to change anytime soon, right? I think about my dad and me trying to get him to do something at 75. And I'm like, nope, okay, that story is done.
That story is done.
Yes, there was a New York Times piece over the weekend about the last 3 weeks of the Trump campaign, sort of an insider's look, and they were quoting him speaking to a group of deep-pocketed donors at a fundraiser saying, "I am who I am," and it's not going to change. But we also know that Donald Trump closely watches the polling, and he has been concerned, and I think he's been reacting to that and lashing out a little bit about the closing of the margins
That's what the press conference was about.
Right, yeah. And, maybe that's going to light a fire under him. I hear you on the way black men will respond to attacks on a black woman, particularly questioning her racial identity. But I also think that he can very easily pivot back. We've had a rocky few weeks. It's not been helpful. Kamala Harris does have momentum, but Trump can still move to issues that are forefront of voters' minds where he's got a polling advantage. Immigration and the economy. He needs to be focusing on those. There do need to be attacks on Harris and Waltz. That's part of how this process works. Lord knows Harris and Waltz are attacking him and J.D. Vance. So you've got to go out there and attack. But it's wise to kind of stay away from anything that has to do with race or her intelligence. I know this low IQ individual thing is something that he has said for many years. It's not something that he just says to a woman of color. He says it to whoever his opponent is, white man, black woman, doesn't matter to him. But given this dynamic, it's probably not, take the word probably out. It's not a good idea to go with the low IQ individual attack. It's not effective and probably loses more ground. And I don't know that it gains any ground.
All right. Well, more to come. What is this, August 12th? And we are certainly on the home stretch. And we have a debate. We have a debate coming up in September. So it'll be interesting to see how things unfold there. Thank you guys for another nice chat about everything politics here in Georgia. We're going to do it again this week. We're going to talk about the Georgia Election Board. A lot of activity there going on with that board that needs some unraveling. So we're going to talk about that in our second edition of Political Breakfast this week. So we'll chat then. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.